So, Fun Friday. Today I want to talk about the idea of a merry heart does good like a medicine. And I've often used the phrase laughing all the way to heaven. And I think the issue is a lot of people have spiritualized sadness or soberness of mind so much that they've forgotten about the joy of the Lord. And when we think about the joy of the Lord as our strength, it's twofold. One, those things that bring the Lord joy strengthen us. And two, the joy that the Lord gives us strengthens us. And the Bible has a lot of verses about the Lord giving us joy. He fills our mouths with laughter, and our fills our hearts with laughter and our mouths with singing, according to the Psalms. He has caused our mouths to rejoice. The Bible says in Psalm 4, uh, then count it all joy when you fall into trials. And there's this whole idea that we can rejoice in who the Lord is. And I think the problem of our society right now is because negative things are happening and a lot of people are reporting on them. The only thing people can think about are negative things. And I think the enemy wants to use that in people's lives. That if you notice, people are fearful, they're sad, they're grumpy, they're upset, they're frustrated. There are all these negative things happening because there's COVID, there's been some racial problems and violence and then of course we're in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, so there's a lot of fires and people are displaced from their homes and we're witnessing tragedy, and that's heartbreaking as it should be. But at the same time, there's so much reporting on the tragedy that people forget what's important. And what's important is to enjoy the blessings that God does give us and not forget them. And I've talked in the past about the distinction between what is important and what is urgent. And some of these crises that are occurring in all around us, they are urgent. But what is important is that we rejoice in the Lord. What is important is that we can rejoice in each other. Things that are important that people have even discovered during the COVID crisis. What's important is the joy you can have as a family as you fellowship together. What's important is the joy you can have in worshiping the Lord. What's important are good friendships. These things are important while they don't always present themselves as urgent. And we need to acknowledge that. And I think the greatest testimony that a Christian can have in a time of crisis is the joy of the Lord. That as people are waking up every day thinking about what's wrong, uh, people who wake up every day thinking about what's right can truly be a blessing. While people are weeping and carrying sorrow, and we want to weep with those who weep, we also want to remember there's always a reason to rejoice, and there are examples throughout history of people who rejoiced. And in fact, one of the no people group probably suffered more in America than the African slaves, and yet history is replete with examples of they had one day off a week, and on that day they would sing and dance all day. And why? Because that joy, that rejoicing, that laughter did good like a medicine, as the Bible says. A merry heart does good like a medicine. And so I was thinking about that, and the people can turn everything into a problem. And I think, for instance, music was designed to cause the heart to rejoice, and the purpose of singing is not to do it well, but to lift the heavy heart. And when we think about, well, what's the purpose of music, what's the purpose of singing, to lift the heavy spirits. God designed it to be an uplifting experience to us, and there'll always be those people who will say, well, you're not singing it right, or you're not playing it right, or you're not doing this, you're not doing that. and sometimes even our joking is taken too seriously. Uh, so when I think of, I play a lot of different instruments, not just the banjo. I play some music instruments too, and I've always told a lot of banjo jokes. I like banjo jokes, and my first exposure to a banjo was probably 1974. My brother had borrowed one from some guy, which had Chicago tuning on it at the time, and I played around with it then, and I've had a few and this and that. Well, I have more than a few now, and but I've discovered that I like banjo jokes, like how do you tune a banjo with wire cutters, and I like that kind of stuff for whatever reason. Now, some people have taken it really seriously, and oh, you don't like banjos. And about 15 years ago, I uh, I played a banjo in church while my wife led a song, and afterwards someone came up and said, I don't understand, why you don't like the banjo. When you went to play it, it sounded beautiful. Uh, I never said I didn't like it. I just tell banjo jokes, and they're just jokes. And lighten up, would you? That's what I'd like to say to so many people. Just lighten up. So much of that kind of stuff that we get all serious about. I remember on a cycling trip with a whole bunch of people. Um, I was riding along, and a guy rides up next to me and looks at my bike and says, "Hey, wow, you're totally set up for comfort." Like, yeah. Well, why? Why would you do that? And I'm like, to be comfortable. It's like, I'm not, he says, but it's harder to beat people uphill when you set up for comfort. Who cares? I'm going to enjoy the experience. Let's have a merry heart. So I was thinking about problems, and I think of them sometimes like broken strings. And whenever I build an instrument, uh, and it's a new type of creation, so on and so forth. The first set of strings I put on it are a sacrificial lamb. I mean, they are going to get broken because I tune and detune and move them, and I do so much with them. By the time I get everything adjusted and just the way I want it, they're worn out and starting to break. And so it's not uncommon over the years, whether they're steel or nylon strings, it doesn't matter. It's not uncommon. People might see that I have them tied together up at the headstock or something like that. And it sounds fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's like, why don't you get new strings? Well, I might get a little more out of these. And I'm just having fun doing it. And so on my mountain banjo, that of course happened. This was my most recent build. And so you can see here, there's a knot. Now this is some string off of a nylon string guitar. It was just an end that for whatever reason I didn't get rid of. I saved thinking maybe I'll have to tie a string together. And so of course it broke in the process of adjusting and detuning and all of that. So I tied it together. And then recently the chanterelle string broke, and so I tied it together, and oddly the knot is right on the bridge, which is a great place for a knot. And I also broke here, so I tied it. This is actually a steel wound string tied to a nylon string, so I could get it to reach. And sounds fine. So if you think of your problems as broken strings, I would say this: life's got problems. Tie a knot in it and move on and keep singing. Just keep singing. Tie a knot in your problems and keep rejoicing. Uh, you'll be amazed at what the Lord will do. And every time that happens, it can be a victory. And, I personally, because I'm a strange person, get a certain amount of joy out of playing and singing with strings that have been broken and tied back together. I think it's because so many people get so obsessive about having everything perfect. When you can make music with things that aren't perfect, it's a real pleasure. So I'm going to end this session with I'm starting a new build out of repurposed flooring, and so I like to repurpose wood and repurpose flooring, and I hope it will eventually lead to a devotion where, the Lord repurposed some wood once. He repurposed the cross. And I want to give a devotional on that when I'm finished. But I'm starting a new build, strange build hybrid, and I'll explain that. And so I've attached a short 2-minute video to this one that's showing the beginning of the documentation of me building this instrument. And my goal is each week on Friday not to do a lot other than upload a video showing where I am in that build. And if you like that kind of thing, you'll enjoy watching how it's built. And as I've said before, I don't think of myself as a master craftsman. I have a lot of fun doing it, and if I can do it, I'm sure others can, and I think you should just enjoy it. So the Lord bless you, and we'll see you later. So I'm experimenting with something. First of all, I have never tried to document the process of a build before on an instrument, and so that's new. And I am going to experiment with hybriding a mountain banjo, which isn't really that complicated. It's the same basic design. I'm just going to make the skin an 11-inch sound pad, a tone ring, instead of a 6-inch tone ring. So it's just going to be bigger. And part of that is I have in my hand an old Bakelite banjo rim that had gotten broken, and so you can see it's broken. And it's Bakelite is basically a plastic of resin, and it's just not something I've had luck repairing and using, and so I just figured out how to bypass it on a different banjo and made one out of plywood. But it occurred to me that this would be ideal for a tone ring inside a mountain banjo, which makes it bigger, and my theory is it will give it a deeper tone. And I'll be making that all out of hardwood and kind of showing the process as I go. So first of all, my first step is I'm going to go over to the bandsaw and remove this flange, which is used to hold hooks for the tension ring and to put tension on the skin, and mountain banjo does it differently. So essentially all this is a tone ring that pushes against the skin. So I think my theory is I can super glue the crack because it won't be under a lot of pressure, and make it work that way. We'll see.